In the waning centuries of the 36th millennium, as the Imperium staggered under the weight of its own corruption, the Adeptus Mechanicus initiated the most ambitious and most maligned genetic endeavor in its history, the 21st Founding. The Black Dragons were not born in glory. They were forged in secrecy in the haunted forges of Mars and the outer gene laboratories where ancient STC processes were reawakened. To the Imperium at large, the 21st Founding would be remembered as the Cursed Founding. For the Black Dragons, it would be a brand seared into the marrow of their being. There are no great triumphs to mark their beginning. No parades of thunderous drop pods or salutes from honored chapters. There was only silence. They emerged from the warp like ghosts, an unfamiliar chapter bearing a sable dragon upon a white field, their armor clad in midnight and flame. No formal announcement was made, no proclamation of lineage. The only hint of their origin was a sealed document from the Magi of the Genitor Guild, handed to the High Lords of Terra with expressions best described as cautious. Their gene seed, it is believed, was derived from the lineage of Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders. Yet this was never confirmed. If the Salamanders knew, they never claimed them. If the Mechanicus altered the gene stock, they never confessed. And if the Black Dragons themselves questioned it, they never voiced it aloud. From the start, they were aberrant. Their battle brothers often bore strange physical characteristics, pronounced brow ridges, elongated fangs, and, most disturbingly, bone protrusions erupting from arms and shoulders. The Mechanicus deemed these stable mutations, the os modula implant expressing traits far beyond what should have been possible. But what was stable to the priests of Mars was blasphemy to many within the wider Imperium. Their first deployments were on the fringe of Imperial space, assigned not to grand crusades or reclamation wars, but to border worlds too violent, too unstable, too contaminated for other chapters. These were not battles of glory. These were slaughters in the dark. On the acid plains of Vandrex II, they fought back biomutant hordes that had overrun an Imperial research colony. There, records show, a force of just 60 Black Dragons purged over 100,000 corrupted humans and Xenos hybrids in less than 3 weeks, fighting through radioactive storms and terrain warped by warp exposure. The Mechanicus marked the campaign a success. The Inquisition noted the extremely high attrition among the enemy and the absence of any recovered gene seed tithes from fallen Black Dragons. Later, on the world of Aradex Prime, they were deployed against a rebelling PDF that had turned to heretical techno-heresy, creating cyborg war beasts out of captured civilians. While the Ultramarines refused the deployment due to questionable data integrity from the region, the Black Dragons descended without hesitation. Survivors spoke of shadows that moved in silence, of Marines whose armor scraped as if carrying a second skin beneath. When the rebellion was crushed and Aradex bombarded to ashes, no one questioned the efficiency. But rumors spread. Rumors of Black Dragons who executed not just heretics, but loyalist survivors whose gene purity could not be confirmed. Whispers grew louder in the halls of the Inquisition. Questions were asked, not openly, but in the private offices of Ordo Hereticus Lords and Genitor Archmagi. What had the Mechanicus done? What had they unleashed? To the Black Dragons, these whispers were wind. They did not exist to be praised or understood. They existed to serve. And so they did with brutal efficiency. They took the worst missions, the dirtiest, the most suicidal. When hive worlds were overrun by chaos-worshipping cults, when space hulks disgorged Genestealer broods into Imperial sectors, when worlds were declared perdita by other chapters, the Black Dragons answered the call. In many ways, they became the Imperium's unspoken executioners. Their names were not sung. Their banners were not carried in honorific procession. But when death was needed, Unrelenting, inescapable death, they were summoned. Their structure remained unconventional. Though nominally codex adherent, they deviated subtly. Their squads were more fluid. Their chaplains were known as flame bearers. Their rites spoken in a harsh dialect reminiscent of ancient Terran ritual speech. Their chapter master bore the title High Dragon, not Lord Commander. From their earliest records, they also displayed a reverence for fire unmatched even by their rumored progenitors. Entire rituals were built around flame, the purification of armor, the cremation of battle dead, the branding of sacred oaths upon the skin with heated runes. Some whispered this was not just tradition, but necessity. That fire kept something at bay. They maintained no known homeworld. Though Imperial records list them as fleet-based, rumors persisted of a dark redoubt hidden deep in Segmentum Obscurus, a place of volcanic rock and ironstone fortresses. The name was never officially recorded, but in some inquisitorial notes it is referred to only as Draconith. Even within the Astartes Brotherhood, they were outsiders. Chapters such as the Crimson Fists and White Scars expressed quiet concern over joint operations. The Iron Hands outright refused to serve beside them after a disastrous campaign on Anvilos 7, during which several of the Black Dragon's bone-augmented warriors entered a state of berserker rage that could not be controlled. But for all the fear, none could deny their effectiveness. They didn't just win wars, they ended them. When asked why they existed, why the Mechanicus had greenlit such a clearly divergent gene line, one tech priest simply said, "Because sometimes the Emperor needs monsters." And that, perhaps, is the truth of their founding. The Black Dragons were not created for parade ground honor. They were not forged to lead noble crusades. They were born in fire and silence, shaped in defiance of genetic norms, and released into the galaxy like a scalpel made of bone and ash. They were never meant to be understood, only unleashed. And in the shadows of the 36th millennium, as 1,000 heresies bloomed and the Imperium teetered on the brink of collapse, the Black Dragons took their first step into legend. Not as heroes, but as the Emperor's final hidden edge. A blade of fire, and of bone. It begins deep beneath the skin, where the gene seed of most Astartes sculpts a warrior's body into the image of the Emperor. The gene seed of the Black Dragons carves something different, something more ancient, something more brutal. The key lies in one organ above all others, the os modula. To most chapters, it is a biological miracle, a sacred gift engineered to strengthen bone and grow new structures for transhuman endurance. But in the Black Dragons, it is a curse masquerading as a miracle, a harbinger of transformation that is both divine and grotesque. From the moment a neophyte receives the os modula implant, changes begin to take root, first imperceptibly, then monstrously. Within weeks, a tight pressure begins to build behind the eyes, in the jaw, along the length of the arms and spine. Instructors monitor them closely during this phase. Their bone density increases tenfold, not just strengthening but mutating, branching out like ivory vines, searching for exit. The face reshapes, brow ridges swell, teeth elongate. Most notably, protrusions of bone begin to erupt from the forearms, shoulders, and sometimes even the back, like jagged horns emerging from beneath the flesh. The pain is unimaginable, and yet it is embraced. A Black Dragon's apothecary never reaches for a sedative. Instead, the neophyte is told to feel every moment, to know every fracture and twist, for the agony is not a failing, it is a right. It is the touch of the chapter's divine inheritance, and through it, they are reborn. But not all survive. Roughly 1 in 4 recruits die during this phase. Their bodies simply rupture under the strain of uncontrolled mutation, or the bone pushes through vital organs, suffocating them from within. These are mourned not as failures, but as sacred sacrifices. Their remains are incinerated in ritual flame, and their ashes are mixed with black ceramite to craft the ceremonial armor of the chapter's librarians. Those who endure are taken to the Hall of the Unflinching, a vast subterranean sanctum aboard the flagship Crucible of Dawn, where they begin the next phase of their transformation, not into space marines, but into dragon claws. Here, under vaulted ceilings scorched with soot and incense smoke, rows upon rows of sharpening wheels line the walls. Veteran sergeants walk the aisles like black-robed executioners, inspecting the recruits' protruding bones with practiced eyes. These blades, referred to as spurs, are raw, unshaped weapons of bone, and it is here that the neophyte begins his grim task, to carve his mutation into something functional, something deadly. He must grind the edges, hone the points, and shape the protrusions with obsidian files and sacred oils. It takes months. The bone regrows if cut improperly, creating jagged scarring that reduces flexibility. But those who endure, who master the shaping of their own body into a weapon, are welcomed into the sacred brotherhood of the Dragon Claws. These warriors are unlike anything seen among the Emperor's Astartes. Their forearms end in serrated spines that curve forward like raptor talons. Their backs host ridges of jagged bone, some of which have been known to break through power armor during moments of intense exertion or rage. Their helmets are redesigned to accommodate their monstrous skulls, and their gauntlets are custom forged with flexible knuckle plating to allow their natural weapons to extend when needed. It is said that when a dragon claw strikes, the enemy does not hear the snap of bolter fire, but the tearing of flesh and the hiss of breath through sharpened teeth. These warriors are not shunned within their chapter. Quite the opposite, they are revered. Their mutations are called the Gift of the Flame Spine, a title passed down from ancient lore recorded by the chapter's first flame-bearers. To be selected for the Dragon Claws is to be seen as touched by the dragon, chosen to embody the purest form of what the chapter was always meant to become, the union of man and monster, a walking avatar of destruction forged in fire and bone. And yet, this elevation comes with responsibility. A Dragon Claw does not simply fight, he leads charges, breaches fortresses, executes traitors by his own hands. In one notable instance, during the siege of Balthor Gamma, it was a single Dragon Claw, Brother Marshal Egon Raz, who scaled the walls of the heretic stronghold without support, his bare bone spurs tearing into ferrocrete as he climbed. He breached the gatehouse alone, slaughtered the traitor lord with a strike that drove a foot of sharpened ulna through his skull and opened the gates for his brothers. That act was recorded not in ceremony, but carved into the very bulkhead of the assault carrier he rode in on, where his name remains burned in flamer soot. Despite their prowess, the Dragon Claws live in self-imposed isolation. Many spend months, even years, meditating in the claw crypts, vast hollowed chambers filled with the skeletal remains of their dead, where they chant ancient war prayers in a forgotten dialect passed down from the chapter's earliest days. Here, among the bones of those who came before, they study resonance fighting, a brutal martial art that uses the rhythm of bone against bone to produce a near-hypnotic flow of strikes. Few outside the chapter have ever seen it. Fewer still have survived it. The rest of the Imperium regards them with a mix of awe and unease. When Dragon Claws are deployed to fight alongside other Imperial forces, they are often met with veiled suspicion. Commissars avert their eyes. Guardsmen make the sign of the Aquila when they pass. Even other Astartes are known to regard them with a wary distance, as though unsure whether to salute or to draw weapons. The Black Dragons themselves do nothing to correct this. They speak little, they do not remove their helms, and when the fighting begins, they disappear into the heart of the enemy like shadows cast in flame. The Os Modula's influence does not end with the formation of the Dragon Claws. In some rare cases, veterans continue to mutate over the course of centuries. Their bones thicken further, their limbs grow out of proportion, and their armor must be reforged again and again to accommodate their changing forms. In the deepest levels of the chapter's sanctum ships, there are records of dragon claws who have grown so large, so distorted, that they no longer fight with conventional weapons, instead relying solely on their bone to cleave tanks and break ceramite. These are the ancient claws, revered but feared, each housed in custom-built sarcophagus chambers when not in battle. When war comes, their awakening is marked by ritual fire and bone drums echoing through the ship's hold. The sound is not celebratory. It is a warning to the enemy and perhaps even to the Imperium itself, because for all the power that the Os Modula bestows, there remains a fundamental truth. What it gives at a price not just in flesh, but in humanity. For the Black Dragons, that price is paid willingly. Their duty is not to resemble mankind, but to defend it, even if that means becoming something else. Something darker, something born of marrow, fire, and war. And so they sharpen their bones, and they wait for the next war. There is a moment just before the charge, when the battlefield holds its breath. It is not the calm before the storm, it is the breath before the flame. That moment belongs to the Dragon Claws, the monstrous vanguard of the Black Dragons chapter. And when that breath ends, it ends in blood. The Dragon Claws are not just a mutation or a deviation, they are a doctrine unto themselves. Within the war fleet of the Black Dragons, they are kept apart from their brothers. Their barracks are colder, darker, walls draped in flayed bone and scorched metal, not tapestries or banners. There are no litanies of glory etched into their halls, only kill marks scorched into the deck, plating with firebrands. Their creed is not written, it is carved into the bodies of their dead. Each dragon claw is a living weapon, but to understand their battlefield role is to understand more than just mutation. The claws do not deploy like other assault marines. They do not leap from thunderhawks to rain down with bolters screaming. They do not rely on melta charges or heavy plasma. They do not even use standard chains words. Their bodies are the weapon, and the moment they are unleashed is nothing short of surgical carnage. When a war council is called aboard the Crucible of Dawn, the claws are consulted last. Their input is not strategic, it is conditional. Where will the enemy break? The High Dragon asks. Where can we bleed them best? The Dragon Claws speak in short bursts, not of formations or flanking maneuvers, but of wounds, how to open them, where to drive in the claw. They do not aim to win wars with precision. They aim to shatter cohesion, to tear the heart out of the enemy line in a single, terrifying display of violence. Take, for instance, the siege of Mornask Hive during the Sheol Rebellion. A hive world in the Segmentum Obscurus, Mornask fell to corruption over years of festering industrial neglect. Its populace, millions strong, was twisted by whispers from the warp, and when the revolt came, it did so under the banner of a false saint, a prophet of renewal whose sermons ignited a continent-spanning uprising. The Astra Militarum attempted to quarantine the hive. 2 full regiments failed. The walls of the upper hive turned to living stone, and the air became thick with spores that melted lungs. When the Black Dragons arrived, they made no landing announcements, no mass deployment, no warning, just silence. Then, in the dead of night, the eastern wall of the hive shuddered, and something came through it. Not a siege engine, not a breaching charge, but the Dragon Claws. They had scaled the outer spires using only their natural weapons and claws, moving like beasts across the rusting heights. Their armor was blackened to matte ash. They did not speak. They did not roar. They tore. The first defenders to see them described shadows with eyes like coals, blades erupting from their arms, cutting men open before they could scream. By the time the Hive militia realized they were under attack, 2 entire Hab spires had been severed from the rest of the city, quarantined by fire and melted adamantium. The Dragon Claws had moved through 12 vertical levels in under 15 minutes, killing nearly 500 insurgents before the Prophet of Renewal even realized his temple was breached. The Prophet was not captured, his body was never found. But his inner sanctum was burned out, every acolyte within impaled upon scorched bone spikes driven into the walls. The message was clear. Where the Dragon Claws walk, heresy dies without voice. But it is not just terror that makes the Claws effective, it is their unity. Their brotherhood is deeper than blood, bound not by gene seed alone, but by shared pain. Every member of a Dragon Claw unit has endured the same agonizing transformations, the same excruciating rite of self-sharpening, the same months of claw training in the crypts of obsidian bone. They fight in packs, not squads, each unit no larger than 5, each member anticipating the movements of the other like a wolf in its hunting kin. They move through corridors in silence, communicating only through micro-gestures and the soft scrape of bone on ceramite. And they are never far from the Warden. Each pack is assigned a Warden Claw, a veteran of countless engagements whose mutations have grown so extreme that he no longer wears standard power armor. Instead, his frame is sheathed in a hybrid exoskeleton, part servo muscle, part sacred relic, part sarcophagus, designed to accommodate the ever-shifting growth of his body. These Wardens are revered as living saints of the chapter, their bones inscribed with high Gothic litanies, their claws engraved with kill tallies too numerous to read. One such Warden, Brother Margrave Elegon, became legend on the jungle world of Typhon 9. There, a demonic incursion had twisted the world's flora into sentient carnivorous growths. Elegon and his claw pack were dropped via orbital spear, impaling themselves into the middle of the jungle with no reinforcements. For 3 days, Vox contact was lost. It was believed they had perished. On the 4th day, orbital scanners picked up a strange pattern, a clear-cut path, 8 kilometers long, carved through the jungle with perfect symmetry. At its center stood Elegon, his claws broken, his bone plates shattered, his body covered in blood and alien ichor. Around him were the corpses of dozens of demon creatures slain by hand and claw. When asked how he survived, he answered only, "I remembered my pain, and I gave it to them." Such is the mentality of the Dragon Claws. Pain is not endured, it is transformed, wielded, unleashed. Despite this, they are not berserkers. They do not fall into bloodlust. That path belongs to the World Eaters. The Dragon Claws are controlled, methodical in their killing. They study weak points. They strike where nerves end. Their mutations make them fearsome, but their discipline makes them lethal. They are also tacticians in their own right. During the orbital breach of Station Calaxis Prime, a Xenos-infested facility orbiting a dying sun, it was the Claws who coordinated the destruction of the station's reactor core using only boarding torpedoes and silent infiltration. They cut through nearly 80 Tyranid bioforms, each killed with minimal noise, and detonated the reactor only after confirming the full extraction of the Mechanicus data vaults. Not one claw was lost. Their method is as precise as it is brutal, but it comes at a cost. Those who serve in the Claws rarely return to line duty. Their bodies change too much. Their reflexes become tuned for claw over gun, bone over blade. Their place is forever altered. The rest of the chapter respects them, but they are kept at arm's length. They dine alone. They sleep apart. Their rites of confession are delivered in flame-lit alcoves, alone, whispered into bone idols carved from their own fallen brothers. And yet, When the drums of war begin, when the black dragons prepare to strike, it is the claws who are sent first. They are not the spearhead, they are the wound. And through that wound, the fire spreads. Before the black dragons ever march to war, before a single bone blade is unsheathed or a bolt round fired, there is ritual. Not the rote chants of the Codex Astartes, nor the perfunctory machine oaths recited by tech marines over servo motors. No, within the black dragons, ritual is not ceremony, it is a furnace, a crucible through which identity is reforged, faith is weaponized, and pain is made sacred. These are the rites of fire and bone, and to the chapter they are more than tradition. They are the core of what it means to be a black dragon. Upon induction into the chapter, a neophyte does not simply don his armor. He earns it, piece by piece, through trials bound in flesh and memory. The first of these trials is called the Burning Path, an ancient rite held aboard the Black Dragon's flagship, the Crucible of Dawn. It is a colossal chamber, half shrine, half forge, where the ceiling is lined with the scorched skeletons of the chapter's earliest martyrs, each suspended in black iron shackles and crowned with golden laurels. Beneath them, the floor is a mosaic of scorched bones set into volcanic glass, forming the sigil of the flame drake, a dragon coiled around a burning sun. Here, the neophyte is stripped of all clothing and all identity. His name is erased from the record. He is given a single candle and sent into the cloister of smoke, a labyrinth of incense-choked tunnels carved into the living hull of the ship. There are no lights within, no guides, no voices, only heat. The passage winds downward for hours, sometimes days, until it reaches the Chamber of Silence, where a circle of veteran sergeants awaits, cloaked in scorched robes and bearing brands of bone. The neophyte must kneel before them, candles still burning. If it has gone out, he is beaten and sent back to begin the trial again. Only those whose will can protect a single flame through the darkness are permitted to proceed. The flame is then snuffed out, not by breath, but by the searing tip of a bone brand, plunged into the candle's heart, and then pressed to the neophyte's chest, searing the sigil of the chapter into his flesh. He does not cry out. If he does, he is not yet ready. This is only the beginning. From there, the aspirant begins the rite of names, in which he must construct his own war name from the bones of fallen brothers. Within the chapel ossuary, the remains of thousands of black dragons are housed, each catalogued and anointed, their histories recited in whispered monotone by the flame bearers, those chaplains who serve not only as spiritual guides, but as the keepers of legacy. The neophyte is permitted to select 3 bones from the ossuary, one from a hero of wrath, one from a martyr of duty, and one from a brother who died in dishonor. He must carry these bones with him for a full year, embedded within his armor's inner lining. Only when he has proved himself in battle are the bones removed, crushed to powder, and mixed with the sacred oils that will anoint his helmet for the first time. In this way, every black dragon carries the weight of legacy, glory, duty, and shame woven into his very warplate. But even among these grim rites, the trial of the Flamewake stands alone. It is held once every decade within the caldera chamber of the chapter's Hidden Forge monastery, its name unknown, its location unrecorded. Only those who have served for at least a century are permitted to attend. They are brought blindfolded into the heart of a dormant volcano, where rivers of molten rock snake through the temple floor like veins of living fire. It is here that they must pass the threefold test: the trial of endurance, the trial of flesh, and the trial of bone. In the trial of endurance, the aspirant must meditate for 6 days without food or water, while surrounded by burning incense designed to induce hallucinogenic visions. The air grows so thick with heat and vapor that lungs feel like they are melting. Voices are heard, Some say they are the whispers of the Emperor. Others claim they are the murmurs of the gene curse. The aspirant must endure it all without movement, without uttering a single word. In the trial of flesh, a section of the aspirant's armor is removed, and a flame brand is driven into his back in the shape of the ancient sigil called the worm's spine, a curling spiral that represents not the dragon, but the transformation into one. The wound is left open to fester for a full day, and the pain is meant to simulate the torment of mutation, the agony their gene seed has granted them since birth. But it is the trial of bone that defines them. The aspirant is presented with a raw bone shard, carved from the spine of a fallen dragon claw. He must drive this shard into his own body, typically the forearm, embedding it as a living weapon within his own flesh. This is not a prosthetic. This is not augmentation. This is sacrifice. The pain is excruciating. The body may reject the bone. Infection is common. But those who survive walk away with more than just a new weapon. They walk away as initiates of the Pyrrhic Brotherhood, a warrior cult within the chapter that embodies the purest essence of what it means to be a black dragon. These warriors are marked by ritual scarring, enhanced osmodular implants, and armor etched with the flames of every world they've set alight. They serve as bodyguards to the flame bearers, enforcers of the chapter's deeper creeds, and executioners of those who fail the rites. Among these dark traditions, there is also a ritual of creation, the armor forging. Every set of power armor within the chapter is reforged after a Marine's first campaign. It is not a standard issue refurbishment. Instead, the battle brother must melt down a piece of his enemy's weapon, fuse it with fragments of his own armor damaged in battle, and work beside the tech Marines to reforge the plating with his own hands. The resulting armor is uniquely marked by the war he survived and the foes he slew, becoming as personal as the bones in his own body. The chest plate is adorned with a stylized dragon fang, usually shaped from the teeth of a Xenos beast or the bayonet of a traitor. The helmet is often modified to resemble draconic features: elongated visors, horned crests, flame motifs etched with electroscalpels. These are not for intimidation alone. They are to remind the warrior every time he looks upon his reflection of what he has chosen to become. For the black dragons do not fear monstrosity. They embrace it. They understand that the Imperium does not require perfection. It requires victory. And if victory demands mutation, sacrifice, and fire, then they will become the flame, the wound, and the weapon. The rites of fire and bone are the forge through which all of this is made possible. Without them, the black dragons would be a cursed footnote in Imperial archives. With them, they are a legacy written in scar, soot, and seared will. And when the war drums echo through the void, when the chapter gathers once more for battle, it is not with prayers or banners. It is with fire in their hands and bone in their hearts. The rite never ends. It only burns brighter. They say fire purifies, but fire also hides things, in smoke, in shadow, in the curling mirage of heat. And where the black dragons walk, whispers follow. Not the open condemnations of heretics, nor the screaming damnations hurled at traitor Astartes. The whispers are quieter, more dangerous. They curl through the vaulted halls of inquisitorial strongholds, and beneath the brass masks of Mechanicus Magi, murmured in the spaces between words. Are the black dragons truly loyal? The chapter's mutation alone would be cause enough for scrutiny. But mutation is only the surface of the concern. What lies beneath, hidden reports, veiled transgressions, sealed data vaults, is what draws the eye of the Ordo Hereticus. For centuries, the Black Dragons have existed not just as warriors of the Imperium, but as a riddle the Imperium cannot solve. Their very origin, born of the 21st founding, the Cursed Founding, is enough to raise suspicion. Records from the time are fragmented, often redacted. When the High Lords of Terra reviewed the gene seed lineage of the new chapters, the documentation for the Black Dragons was marked irregular but stable. No Primarch was officially attributed. No founding world clearly stated. They were, on paper, a fleet-based chapter with stable leadership and no anomalous data. But behind that language, there were implications few dared speak aloud. The first whisper came from within the Adeptus Mechanicus, long after the Black Dragons had already entered active service. A Magos Biologist by the name of Helvax Threen presented a troubling analysis before the Genitor Conclave. Gene seed from the Black Dragons exhibited non-standard osmodular behavior, with additional ribogenesis beyond what was observed in salamander lineage stock. More alarmingly, these mutations were not degenerative. They were purposeful, designed, controlled. "This is not genetic drift," he said. "This is engineered evolution." The Mechanicus responded by sealing Threen's report under maximum security protocol. He was reassigned to a deep space biovault and never seen again. But the whisper had already escaped. The Inquisition, already wary of the Cursed Founding's many failures, the doomed Flame Falcons, the flesh-consuming sons of Antaeus, turned its eye toward the Black Dragons. What it found was a pattern of silence. Delayed tithe submissions, vague campaign reports, restricted access to apothecarian facilities. The Adeptus Astartes are given a degree of autonomy, yes, but even that autonomy has limits, and the Black Dragons had begun to test them. It began with their refusal to provide gene seed tithe samples. In many chapters, the tithe is a sacred duty, a gesture of faith and continuity with the Adeptus Mechanicus. But the Black Dragons did not share this reverence. When asked, they delayed. When reminded, they deflected. When pressured, they outright refused. Only under threat of censure from the Ordo Astartes did the chapter finally agree to a limited tithe extraction. The resulting samples were disturbing. 100 gene seed glands were submitted. Of these, 25 showed high levels of ossified calcification, far beyond acceptable thresholds. 15 displayed anomalies in the catalepsin node, resulting in heightened aggression during RM suppression phases. 7 could not be classified at all, entirely foreign tissue structures, more bone than gland, as if the body had begun replacing internal organs with a skeleton of its own design. The Magos responsible for the analysis committed suicide 3 weeks later. From that point forward, investigations multiplied. Several Black Dragons apothecaries were summoned to account for their chapter's deviations. None complied. One envoy, Brother Medicae Razior, was reported as missing in transit en route to Mars. His ship's last Vox signal was an automated distress code, system malfunction. The wreckage was never found. By M40.672, a formal inquisitorial decree was drafted by Lord Inquisitor Carvanus of the Ordo Hereticus, a full-scale audit of the Black Dragon's facilities, gene seed, and fleet assets. The audit was to be conducted jointly with the Adeptus Mechanicus under Mechanicus Order Sigma 11, the same writ once used during the investigation of the Firehawks chapter prior to their disappearance. But the audit never took place. The day the order was set to be executed, the Black Dragon's primary fleet, the Crucible of Dawn, along with 5 escort frigates and their primary Reclusiam vessel, disappeared from all augur and astropathic communication. No warp trail, no Geller field echo. Nothing. Gone. It would be 8 years before they resurfaced, leading a strike against an emergent Chaos warband in the ghost systems of Helix Reach. No explanation was given, no questions answered. When the Inquisition demanded an audience, the chapter's response was a single Vox transmission from the High Dragon himself. "We serve the throne in fire and death. We do not answer to whispers." But the Inquisition is not so easily rebuffed. They turned to those who had fought beside the Black Dragons, to their battle brothers among the Adeptus Astartes. And what they found was a wall of silence. Not loyalty, not camaraderie, fear. The Imperial Fists refused to serve beside the dragons after the Gathalamor campaign, citing doctrinal and physiological incompatibilities. The Dark Angels offered no comment but had purged their databanks of all joint operation records. The Marines Malevolent, known for their disdain of subtlety, issued a formal complaint to the Ordo Astartes, declaring the Black Dragons untrustworthy mutants, dangerously unstable. Not even the Salamanders, the chapter most commonly assumed to be the dragons' progenitors, ever formally acknowledged them. In fact, records indicate that during the Second War for Cerberax, a joint deployment of salamanders and black dragons was vetoed by Vulcan Hastan himself. No reason was given. Among the people of the Imperium, the black dragons became legend. In the frontier systems and ash worlds where their ships appear without warning, they are seen as avenging spirits. Silent, monstrous angels of death whose appearance always precedes a firestorm. There are no sermons, no declarations. They come, they kill, they vanish. The whispers deepen. Some claim the dragons have tapped into forbidden Xenos science to stabilize their mutations. Others believe they are descendants not of Vulcan, but of some lost or twisted Primarch, hidden by the Emperor for fear of what he might become. The most heretical claim is whispered only by fools or madmen, that the Black Dragons have begun breeding their own Astartes outside the bounds of Mechanicus oversight, creating a new species of warrior, more bone than flesh, more fire than soul. The truth is buried beneath layers of silence and ash. And yet, despite all this, no charges of heresy have ever been formally leveled against the Black Dragons. No excommunication, no censure. The reason is simple. They win. They answer calls others will not. They purge enemies others cannot. They survive again and again, where loyalist chapters fall and break. They walk the line between damnation and duty without flinching. And the High Lords, those old bones on Terra, know a terrible truth. Sometimes the Emperor needs monsters, and monsters, if pointed in the right direction, are worth more than saints. So the whispers continue, but they are drowned out by flame and by bone. The fire that burns brightest often casts the deepest shadows. For the Black Dragons, their curse was never confined to whispered rumors or unspoken fears. In time, the very nature of their twisted physiology would not only define their legacy, but threaten to unravel it. Mutation had always marked their path, but in one terrible war, the corruption of their gene line would not just be revealed, it would be weaponized. The horrors began in the skies over Denorian Prime. Denorian was a volcanic world wrapped in perpetual storm, its skies veined with crimson lightning, its surface cracked and steaming with tectonic fury. A marginally inhabited Imperial mining colony, Denorian should have held no value worth defending. But beneath its scorched crust lay a mineral unique to only 3 known worlds: Vorlusite, a rare crystal used in plasma dampening matrices, and psi-active blade cores. The Mechanicus had been quietly extracting it for decades, until the Xenos came. Not just any Xenos. The Dark Eldar, pirates of pain, raiders of souls. They fell upon Denorian with the cruelty of a scalpel, not the hammer. Precision raids, surgical strikes, entire convoys, and hab complexes emptied in the blink of a lightning storm. The Mechanicus screamed for help, but most chapters ignored the plea. Denorian was too deep in the Obscurus fringe, too far from active supply lines. Only the Black Dragons answered. But what they found on Denorian was not a simple raid. It was a hunt. The Dark Eldar had not come merely to pillage or torment. They had come for the Black Dragons themselves. The Archon leading the assault was known to the Ordo Xenos by one name, Sliskus the Whisper Knife. A collector of biological oddities, a manipulator of flesh and soul, Sliskus had heard of the Black Dragon's mutations through intercepted inquisitorial chatter. To him, they were not warriors. They were prizes, and he would take them piece by piece. The initial contact on Denorian's southern continent was textbook Astartes doctrine, fire lines established, drop sites secured, local Mechanicus forces extracted. But when the Dragon Claws advanced into the ash-choked plains to root out the Dark Eldar base, they disappeared. 3 entire Claw units gone without a trace. No Vox contact, no locators, no remains. Then the screams began. At first, they were thought to be psychic echoes, oral ghosts left behind by Dark Eldar's soul-rending weaponry. But soon, audio auspex confirmed what no one wanted to believe. The screams were theirs, the missing claws. Their agony was being broadcast across the comms net like a litany of horror, voices warped, layered atop each other in impossible, overlapping loops. Worse still, the signals contained data corruption of a biological nature. Embedded within the screams were genetic codes, distorted fragments of Black Dragon DNA, rewritten into screaming digital contagions. The chapter's librarians ordered the transmission shut down, but it was too late. The plague had already begun. It started with Brother Kalos, a veteran Claw who had survived over 300 engagements. During a routine recon sweep, he collapsed mid-stride. His armor buckled, his limbs spasmed, and then his bones began to grow, explosively. Spines erupted from his ribs, horns spiraled out of his jaw. His fingers fused into talons, and his voice dissolved into an inhuman howl. His squad, stunned, tried to restrain him. 3 were wounded, 2 were killed. Kalos was only stopped when his own mutation caused his spine to snap like a whip, severing his brainstem. The apothecaries called it a runaway osmodular bloom, an unheard-of acceleration in bone mutation caused by a foreign stimulus. Soon, others followed. Marines began reporting phantom pains in their limbs. Their armor, forged to accommodate their unique frames, no longer fit. Skin ruptured, bone bent metal, and always in the distance the laughter of the Dark Eldar. This was not a natural mutation, it was a weapon. What Sliskus had done was unfathomable. Using captured dragon claws, vivisected while alive, dissected and studied, he had crafted a biovirus, a weapon not of flesh, but of bone. Delivered through corrupted Vox transmissions, ambient radiation pulses, and even proximity to captured Astartes relics, the osteovirus spread like wildfire. This was not just a biological attack, this was warfare against identity. The Black Dragons responded as only they could, by embracing the very curse now used against them. On the night of the 3rd day, Chaplain Mordric Jane, the flame-bearer assigned to Denorian command, led a ritual now considered heretical by nearly all Imperial standards. He assembled every affected Marine, those whose bones had begun to twist, whose skin could no longer contain the mutation, and declared them chosen of the Pyrrhic flame. The enemy would break us by weaponizing what we are, he declared. Let them. For we are not afraid of what we become. We are the dragons, and we are fire given form. We are not beasts, we are judgment. What followed was a slaughter. The corrupted claws, now monstrous parodies of their former selves, were unleashed. No longer bound by the limits of human form, they stormed the enemy bastions with bone lances for arms, spiked crests bursting from their helmets, and molten fury in their eyes. The Dark Eldar, arrogant in their planning, had not expected the Black Dragons to turn their weakness into a weapon. The counterattack was devastating. In a single night, Sliscus's citadel of pain was reduced to slag. His homunculi bodyguards were ripped apart, their alchemical flesh no match for what the dragons had become. And Sliscus himself, despite his attempts to escape through a mirror gate, was caught mid-teleportation by a claw whose mutation had given him the strength to crush the gate's stabilizers. Sliscus vanished, screaming into the warp. His final fate remains unknown. In the aftermath, the surviving dragons, those still stable enough to stand, gathered the broken remains of their corrupted kin. Not a single body was burned, not a single name erased. Instead, they were enshrined. Across their flagship, dozens of shrines were constructed, each housing the skeletal remains of the infected. Their names etched in molten adamantium, their bones preserved in flame glass, not as a warning, but as veneration, for in death they had proven a truth the Imperium refused to see, that the black dragons were not broken. They were not an accident. They were not a flaw in the Emperor's great design. They were something new, a fusion of warrior and weapon, man and monster, steel and sinew and sharpened marrow. The enemy had tried to use their curse against them, and the dragons had turned the curse into a sword. From that day forward, a new litany was added to the chapter's sacred rites. Our bones are fire. Our blood is ash. Our curse is not our shame. It is our vengeance. And the Imperium, silent in its fear, dared not ask what had happened on Denorian. The Ordo Xenos classified the event. The Mechanicus denied the bioanalysis. The reports were sealed, archived, buried. But the Black Dragons remembered. They always remember. And now, when the bone protrusions grow too fast, when the os modula flares hotter than it should, when a neophyte wakes screaming, his arms erupting in spines, they do not call it a mutation. They call it an awakening. And the curse is no longer something they endure. It is something they unleash. There are worlds whose names are buried beneath the dust of time, forgotten backwaters swallowed by the endless churn of the galaxy. But then there are those that endure, not for their triumph, but for their fall. And one such name, whispered even now in the darkest sermons of the ecclesiarchy and in the broken prayers of the battle-scarred black dragons, is Antagonus. Once a jewel of the segmentum obscurus, Antagonus was no fortress world, no forge world, no naval bastion. It was a shrine world, a place of faith. Its skies were purple with incense storms, its mountains carved into cathedrals that reached toward the Emperor's light. For millennia, it stood as a monument to martyrdom, draped in relics and legends, bathed in the eternal flame of purity. Pilgrims came in droves, genuflecting before the bones of saints, offering alms to the sisters of the Ebon Veil. But Antagonus would become something far darker than holy. It began in silence. The pilgrim ships stopped transmitting. The sisters' crypts went dark. Vox signals sent from the basilicas were no longer received. At first, it was dismissed. A warp storm, a technical fault, even sabotage by jealous neighboring governors. But when a Black Templar cruiser approached the system and found nothing but silence and drifting debris, the truth became clear. Antagonus was dead. The Inquisition, already wary of strange reports in the region, dispatched Inquisitor Werner Lettinger, a methodical and unyielding Puritan of the Ordo Hereticus, accompanied by a small contingent of sororitas. He was prepared to find the aftermath of a Xenos raid. What he found instead was resurrection of the most unholy kind. The dead walked, not in the shambling, mindless way of plague zombies, not in the broken puppet horror of Nurgle's pawns. These revenants were intelligent, coordinated, and horrifyingly aware. Clad in the vestments of priests and pilgrims, their bodies were patched with wires and bone thread, their eyes glowing with a sickly golden light. Their mouths moved in liturgies that sounded like the words of the Emperor, until one listened too closely. The Sisters of the Ebon Vale fought valiantly. They were overrun within a week. Lettinger sent a single astropathic burst back through the warp. One word: help. And the Black Dragons came. They arrived aboard the Crucible of Dawn and the escort strike cruiser Bonefire Redemption, answering not out of obligation nor out of proximity. No, they came because of something else entirely. The planet was speaking. Librarians aboard the chapter fleet had begun experiencing dreams, visions of fire, of bone twisted into sigils, of saints whose tears turned to ash. Chaplain Mordrek Jane, now elevated to Master of Sanctity, declared these visions not random, but summons. A call not from the Emperor, but from something that sought to mock him, and it had chosen Antigonus as its mouthpiece. The Black Dragons did not hesitate. A force of 3 companies made planetfall within a day, striking like a blade into the heart of the cathedral hives. No drop pods, no planetary bombardment. This was a surgical descent, one built not to destroy the enemy, but to isolate whatever was causing the corruption. They landed on the steps of Benediction, once the holiest site on Antagonis, now a shattered ruin crawling with unholy life. Flesh had grown into the stones, bone spires protruded from the statues of saints. The very air carried the scent of embalming oils mixed with burnt marrow. It was there that the Black Dragons first faced the awoken martyrs. These were not mere zombies. These were resurrected holy men, reanimated by forces unknown, filled with stolen scripture and driven by a unity of purpose that defied logic. They chanted hymns in reverse, their voices layered with mechanical static and psychic resonance that struck at the minds of the unprepared. The Black Dragons met them not with bolter and blade, but with ritual counter-rites. The flame-bearers began chanting their own liturgies, words etched in the bone relics of their fallen, setting alight the air with purging incantations. These were not ecclesiarchal blessings, but chapter canticles, designed to harmonize with the psychic residue of corrupted faith. For 3 nights, the dragons fought across the ruined city of Sanctum Rex, their battle marked by firestorms and psychic duels that lit the sky. It was during the 2nd night that the Vault of Echoes was discovered, an underground catacomb hidden beneath the Grand Basilica, where the bodies of fallen saints were kept. What the dragons found there broke even their hardened resolve. The saints had been reconstructed, their bones reassembled into living reliquaries, connected by sinew and electric wire, their skulls hollowed out and filled with voice boxes repeating corrupted prayers in High Gothic. The warp stench was overwhelming. Even the flame-bearers faltered. One librarian, Brother Acrodane, walked into the vault alone. He did not emerge for 6 hours. When he did, his psychic hood was fused to his skull, and he carried the reliquary of false grace, a relic born of heresy, one of the awoken martyrs, still writhing, bound in silvered chains. Akradani declared the source of the corruption to be a warp entity masquerading as the Emperor's voice, feeding on faith and growing stronger with every corrupted prayer. It had become symbiotic with the planet itself, and so the order was given: purge everything. The final assault was not a battle, it was an execution. The dragons moved in coordinated fire teams, not only killing the corrupted but unmaking them. Entire cathedral districts were burned with promethium. Shrines were collapsed with seismic charges. Statues were pulverized and scattered into the ash. Every relic was destroyed. When the Inquisition arrived to assess the aftermath, they found no life, no structure, no faith. Just a charred wasteland where a shrine world once stood. Antagonis was declared Perdita. Official records state that a chaos incursion, perhaps of Nurgle or Malal origin, overwhelmed the planet. that the Black Dragons held the line long enough to allow full exterminatus protocols, that their efforts were sanctioned and coordinated with Inquisitor Lettinger. But what the records do not say, what cannot be said, is that Lettinger was found bound to the central altar of the Basilica, his mouth sewn shut, his eyes burnt out, and his hands placed upon his chest in mock benediction. The dragons did not record how he died, only that he died without fire. To this day, no pilgrimage vessels are allowed to approach the antagonist system. It is listed on most navigational charts as a navigational hazard, gravimetric instability. The Adeptus Mechanicus have made no attempt to reclaim the Volucite beneath its crust. And the Black Dragons, they do not speak of antagonists. But each year, on the solar cycle of its death, the chapter's librarians gather in silence. They carry with them black reliquaries made of fused cathedral stone, within which are housed fragments of scripture found uncorrupted on the planet's surface. Each one is inscribed with the same phrase: "Faith is not what you believe, faith is what you burn for." Antagonis was not just a battlefield, it was a test, and the Black Dragons passed, not with piety, not with purity, but with flame, with bone, with judgment. There are some worlds that are not lost to Xenos or demon or plague. There are worlds lost to ideals. Cable was once a beacon, a temperate agri-world in the Caradim Reach. It fed 7 surrounding systems and maintained a perfect tithing record for over 300 years. Its governors were efficient, its PDF well-drilled, and its ecclesiarchy humble but devout. It had no history of heresy, no notable Xenos incursions, and no inquisitorial interest. To most Imperial scribes, it was a footnote, a quiet success story in an Imperium built on blood. Then came the voices. It began as isolated reports, priests receiving visions during Mass, choir boys chanting verses not in the Book of Light, but in some warped variant of Old Gothic, farmers dreaming of a second birth, of skin made new and light pouring from the bones. The administratum dismissed the symptoms as mass hysteria from nutrient shortages. They were wrong. By the time the Ordo Hereticus received word, the planet's surface had changed. Not physically, no churning warp storms or demonic beasts, but spiritually. The people had begun to worship transformation, not mutation, not chaos. Something more insidious. They called themselves the reincarnated supplicants, a cult of renewal, of willing sacrifice and bodily transcendence. They believed the Emperor's true gift was not protection, but the freedom to shed one's mortal husk and rise anew in sanctified flesh. Their iconography mimicked that of the ecclesiarchy, but subtly twisted. Aquilus with hollow eye sockets, thrones made not of gold, but of bone and root. Their central gospel was known as the Book of Second Skin, a heretical tome said to have been discovered buried in the fields beneath Hive Barrow Primus. It spoke of ascension through surrender, of becoming more than man by surrendering one's original self to flame, to claw, and to the living pattern. By the time Imperial forces landed, the cult had already claimed the primary hives and converted over 1/3 of the planetary defense forces. The rest were in hiding or dead. The Astra Militarum launched a containment operation, 3 regiments deployed. Within 2 months, they were all gone. Cable was declared a contaminated shrine, and the Black Dragons answered. The chapter's 7th Company, led by Captain Zartath, deployed in silence. No fanfare, no signal to Allied forces. When the fleet entered high orbit, they broadcast only a single phrase across all channels. The pattern is broken. The fire comes. Captain Zartath was not known for eloquence. A towering figure, even by Astartes standards, he bore the most advanced osmodular mutations ever recorded in the chapter's recent history. His bone spurs layered like plated scales down his back and shoulders, each etched with kill marks. His right arm was fused at the elbow with a ceramite-reinforced blade of sharpened marrow, honed to a monomolecular edge. His helm was shaped in the visage of a drake's skull, carved from the remains of a tyrannid he had slain on Varka's Deep. But it was not his appearance that terrified his enemies. It was his judgment. Zartath believed that heresy was not an infection to be cured, but a stain to be seared away. And on Cable, he enacted that creed with brutal precision. The first strike came at Hive Barrow Primus, the cult's heart. The dragon claws descended in waves of drop assault claws, not aiming for control points or strategic targets, but for ritual sites, bone cathedrals where the supplicants conducted their ascension rites. Within these vaulted sanctuaries, bound heretics were flayed and consumed by psychic flame, their bones harvested to be grafted into the backs of initiates. These grotesque fusions were called the Boneborn, and they served as cult champions. The claws met them in silence. No battle cries, no declarations, only fire. The bone-forged cultists, half-human and half-artifice, fought with bladed staves and biohacked muscle enhancements. But the dragon claws were beasts incarnate. They moved with the grace of predators, bone spurs lashing out like serpentine fangs, shredding through ritual armor and flesh alike. Each kill was swift, each death a final sentence. Within 3 hours, the entire Hive's upper sanctum was cleansed. But Zartath was not finished. He sent scouts into the outer agri-zones, where reports indicated thousands of civilians had fled, many willingly, seeking to undergo the second skin rituals in the wilderness temples. What the dragons found was worse than prophecy. Entire farming communities had merged into their fields. Bodies buried neck deep, their skulls exposed to the sun, mouths open in endless hymns. Roots grew from their abdomens, connecting them to strange flora that pulsed with unnatural life. The supplicants had found a way to merge human biology with xenoagriculture, creating what Zartath would later describe as groves of flesh-bound faith. He did not hesitate. The Seventh Company launched a full-scale planetary scouring, deploying seismic firebombs to rupture the fields and incinerate anything organic. Dragon Claws led squads of incinerators, whose flame was tuned to blue-hot plasma temperatures, capable of vaporizing bone in seconds. To the cult, this was martyrdom. To the Black Dragons, it was Judgment Day. But the final act of Cable's fall came not in fire, but in choice. With the cities burning and the fields reduced to ash, the last of the supplicants retreated into the volcanic trench of Thermos Cradle, a massive chasm where the cult's original leaders had first found the Book of Second Skin. There, surrounded by thermal vents and lava flows, over 10,000 supplicants stood in silent ranks, men, women, children, waiting. Zartath descended alone. He stood on the edge of the trench and issued a single command: face us and die as humans, or leap and be forgotten. The cultists looked upon him, this towering creature of horn and flame, and saw not a monster but a mirror. They saw in the Black Dragons what they had aspired to be. The next step: evolution through mutation, strength through sacrifice, and they understood the truth. They were imitations. Zartath turned his back. One by one, the cultists began to jump into the flames, into the chasm, into nothingness. No bolters fired, no blades were drawn. By dawn, Thermos Cradle was a tomb. Cable was dead. When the Inquisition arrived weeks later, they found a scorched world. No enemy remains, no civilian refugees, just ash and the Black Dragons, silent, armored, their helms reflecting the fading heat of a planet cleansed not just of life, but of faith corrupted. Zartath made no report. The chapter's scribes etched the campaign into the chapter's bone archives under a single word: fracture. To the Imperium, Cable is now a red-circled world, a dead place, quarantined by decree, its existence denied. A minor footnote in the Ordo Hereticus archives, but the Black Dragons remember. They remember a world that tried to remake itself in their image, and they remember what must be done when imitation becomes blasphemy. No sermons, no mercy, only fire, only bone. Armageddon, a name etched into the bedrock of Imperial memory like a wound that never fully heals. It is a world that has burned again and again under the boots of warlords, heretics, and Xenos alike. A cursed crucible that calls not just for warriors, but for legends. And when Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka, prophet of the Wa, returned in 998 M41 to bring his most brutal invasion to its shores, the Black Dragons answered. But they did not come as saviors. They came as fire. The call to arms went out across the Segmentum Solar like a clarion scream. Orcs, in impossible numbers, thundered toward Armageddon in kilometer-long hulks and scrap moon war barges. The skies filled with green-hued wreckage, an armada of fury. Armageddon's defenders, already battered from 2 previous wars, readied themselves for extinction. Dozens of Space Marine chapters answered the call. The Salamanders, the Black Templars, the Storm Lords. And among them came a fleet wreathed in shadow, marked not with proud colors or noble heraldry, but with an obsidian dragon coiled in flame. The Black Dragons. Led by High Dragon Tharagon Vale, the chapter committed nearly its full strength. 9 of its 10 companies made planetfall within a week, dispersed strategically across the equatorial landmasses of the planet, focusing not on command centers or population hubs, but on flashpoints where Orc pressure was most acute and Imperial lines were at their thinnest. Vale's strategy was not defense, it was rupture. He would stab into the heart of the Wa and set it ablaze from within. It was on Phoenix Island, an industrial island chain in the polluted equatorial sea, that the Black Dragon's legend was carved into the stone of Armageddon. Phoenix Island had once housed promethium refineries and atmospheric converters. Now it was overrun. Storm boys dove from the clouds like green missiles, their screaming jump packs forming sonic trails that shattered windows for kilometers. Mech boys' scrap forts churned forward across rusted ground like tumors, surrounded by kilocans, death dreads, and beastly grots in impossible numbers. The 4th and 5th companies of the Black Dragons made landfall in the worst of it, amid broken pipelines and drowned sub-habs surrounded on all sides by orcs who outnumbered them 100 to 1. They did not falter. Led by Captain Iron Vakor, a bone-forged veteran known for embedding shards of his own mutated ribcage into his armor shoulder pauldrons, the dragons formed a perimeter around the shattered ruins of Hab Refinery Kappa 17. Rather than hold ground, Vakor ordered his squads to dig down, transforming subterranean maintenance tunnels into kill boxes. Every turn, every access chute, became a furnace of fire and steel. The orcs, predictable in their bloodlust, charged in droves. The dragon claws met them in silence. Every strike was calculated, every ambush surgical. Orcs found themselves caught in choke points, their bodies piling up in tunnels too narrow for their bulk, crushed under their own numbers. Plasma coils hissed, bone blades flashed. The tunnels echoed not with war cries, but with the wet sound of severed meat and the dull crack of claws meeting spine. Within 48 hours, Kappa 17 had become an ossuary. But the orcs didn't stop. They couldn't, and neither did the dragons. At the same time, on Hara's Isthmus, a rusted land bridge connecting Phoenix Island to the main continent, the chapter's dreadnoughts were deployed. ancient warriors encased in sarcophagi of fire-blackened ceramite, their minds long divorced from mortal thought. Each had been a dragon claw in life. In undeath, they were something worse. Venerable dreadnought Sarmok the Hollowed led the charge. A walking fortress bearing twin heavy flamers and a triple-barreled bone shard cannon, Sarmok advanced into the orc front line without backup, his vox silent, his footfalls rhythmic. Behind him came a procession of Primaris battle brothers, led by Primaris Lieutenant Kor Talm, a newly ascended warrior who had earned his place in the chapter by surviving the rites of flame and bone in the aftermath of the Donorian campaign. The Primaris troops had not yet fought beside dragon claws in such numbers, but on Armageddon, that divide vanished. The claws gave no instruction. They expected none. The Primaris watched, learned, adapted. They moved in time with the older brothers, a harmony of flesh and fire forged through necessity and blood. By the third day, Hara's isthmus was sealed. The orcs tried to build bridges of corpses. The dragons burned them. But the battle that truly defined the chapter came during the siege of Hive Tempestora. The Hive was under siege by warlord Urzag Skullkraka, a sub-chieftain of Gazkul's Wa, known for wearing the scalps of Imperial commanders as a cape and deploying squig mines that barked before they exploded. His forces had breached the outer wall, and the Hive's PDF were being overrun. The Black Dragons did not reinforce the defenders. They attacked behind enemy lines. Deploying via orbital grav thrusters, the second company dropped directly onto Skullkraka's command encampment, a haphazard fortress made of scrap tanks, ruined statues, and a downed Valkyrie used as a throne. The descent was a meteor storm of bone and fury. When the dust cleared, the dragons were already in motion, slicing through orc knobs and mega knobs alike with claw and flamer. Sergeant Valen of the Dragon Claws reached Skullkraka first. The orc was 3 meters tall, armored in scavenged dreadnought plating and wielding twin cleavers named Mork and also Mork. Valen said nothing. He drove his elbow spur through the warlord's jaw, shattered his skull with a second strike to the temple, and then burned the corpse with promethium until even the orcs were too afraid to retrieve it. Within hours, the siege broke. Across the planet, word spread, not of the Ultramarines' doctrine, not of the Black Templars' crusade, but of bone-clad monsters who fell from the sky and left only ashes behind. The orcs, lacking fear in the traditional sense, nonetheless began to avoid Black Dragon territory. Storm Boys diverted flight paths, Mech Boys adjusted battle plans. Something primal had been awakened, some ancient recognition of predator and prey. Gazgakul himself never spoke of the dragons, but reports suggest his lieutenants began referring to them as the Black Thorns, a force not worth fighting, but simply avoiding, lest the Wa lose momentum. By the end of the campaign, the Black Dragons had suffered grievous losses. Nearly 2 full companies had been reduced to a fraction of their former strength. Apothecaries reported that the osteoviruses born on Donorian had begun to re-emerge in some veterans, forcing painful bone growth that required emergency surgery or full sarcophagus entombment. But they did not break. They did not retreat. They endured. When the campaign ended, the High Lord sent accolades, medals, imperial honors. The dragons accepted none. Instead, they gathered their dead on Phoenix Island and built a pyre, bone and ceramite, claw and banner, all burned together in silence. No words, no hymns, just fire. A librarian recorded the moment in the chapter's Book of Ashes, carving a single passage in high script across a bone-plated data scroll. We do not fight for banners. We do not fight for praise. We fight to be remembered by the things we destroy. Armageddon still burns in memory. But it is not only the name of Gazkul that echoes through its ruins. It is the sound of claws on steel, of bone-splitting flesh, and of fire born in silence. The fury of the Black Dragons was loosed that day, and the galaxy will never forget it. The galaxy had cracked open when the cicatrix maledictum tore reality asunder, slicing a wound across the stars from the maelstrom to the Eye of Terror. It did more than sever systems. It severed certainty. Faith became fragile. Astropaths screamed and fell silent. Whole sectors vanished into warp storms. For most of the Imperium, it was a time of terror, a drowning in darkness. For the Black Dragons, it was a summons. They did not mourn, they mobilized. Even as terror reeled and Segmentum Obscurus was swallowed in half-light, the Black Dragons gathered on the war voids of their fleet. The Crucible of Dawn, the Pyrrhic Requiem, and the dreadnought-laden vessel known only as Bonehold rose from their hidden anchorages like ancient predators returning to the surface of a black sea. The time for secrecy was over. The galaxy no longer needed containment. It needed cleansing. At the helm of this new vision was High Dragon Tharagon Vale, whose face had not been seen outside his helm in over 2 centuries. His body was more exoskeleton than armor, ribbed with fused bone and adamantium plates carved with sacred ignitions. He addressed his chapter not with rhetoric, but with edict. We are not cursed. We are not forgotten. We are what the Imperium never had the courage to become. The rift has opened. Let it burn. And so began what would be recorded, though never officially sanctioned, as the Crusade of the Dragon. Not a formal campaign under Guilliman's Indomitus banner, not an extension of the Torchbearer fleets, or a reinforcement of the new Ultima foundings. This was a crusade of reckoning, self-declared, self-led, self-fueled, a war not waged for territory but for judgment. Their first target was not a Chaos Warband, nor a traitor forge. It was a planet called Desmenta, a feudal world that had once paid tithes to the Administratum with grain and conscripts. Since the coming of the rift, it had fallen silent, not from destruction, but from worship of a new prophet, the Cradle King, a robed giant who preached of bone salvation and flame convergence. The records were familiar. The rites matched grotesquely certain heresies once whispered on cable, ritual branding, bone grafting. Even the Book of Second Skin re-emerged, copied now by hand in illuminated script across flayed parchment made from the flesh of former nobles. The Black Dragons made no contact. They made landfall. Drop pods streaked through the atmosphere like falling stars, striking Desmenta's capital temple palace with pinpoint accuracy. The Cradle King's congregation, tens of thousands strong, had gathered for his Ascension liturgy. Their bodies painted with blood, their mouths sewn shut in silence. It did not save them. The Black Dragons emerged into fire and chaos, their mutated frames barely constrained by their armor, their claws gleaming with freshly oiled edges. No orders were shouted, no surrender was offered. They advanced into the congregation like living storms, and the cult broke not in panic, but in rapture. They believed their gods had come, and perhaps in some horrific way they had. The Cradle King proved no prophet. He was revealed as a corrupted psyker, his mutation stabilized through a fusion of warp exposure and radical mechanicus gene hacks. His bones glowed, his words rippled flesh. He floated above the altar, radiating sorcerous force. Librarian Cassandros, a flame-touched psyker with a horned helm and a third eye etched into his forehead with molten steel, faced him. The battle was not one of blades, but of will. Fire against false light, discipline against desire. The Cradle King's psychic storm lashed the chapel, turning statues to dust and melting ceramite. But Cassandros stood firm. With a scream that burned the minds of every surviving cultist, he severed the false prophet's soul from its body, trapping it in a ruined bone cage bound with the sigils of Terra's deep past. The relic was taken back to the fleet, where it remains sealed in the crypt of the Silent Flame, a chamber no one enters without the Flamebearer's sanction. Desmenta was cleansed in 6 days. No Vox message sent, no report filed. The only record was etched into the hull of a returning drop pod, a single line in Gothic script. Burn the root, not just the rot. From there, the crusade expanded. World after world, the Black Dragon struck, not in large formations, but in calculated detachments. They called it shard warfare, a doctrine perfected through centuries of isolation. Each company operated as a splinter of the chapter's will, mobile, autonomous, deadly. They moved in silence, struck without warning, and vanished before reinforcement could arrive. On Calyx 6, they exterminated a corrupted PDF force attempting to create a new Adeptus cult centered on self-evolution through ossification. On Parnassus Reach, they purged a rogue Migos biologist who had begun creating improved space marines using hybrid gene seed and machine-printed bone. On Sindor Hallows, they intervened against a splinter of the Red Corsairs who had begun vivisecting Imperial civilians to harvest pure bone lace for demon engines. In every instance, the Black Dragons left behind no monuments, no garrisons, no survivors of the corrupted, only ashes and memory. But it was during the cleansing of Forge Shrine Bastior that the crusade reached a turning point. Bastior had once been a loyal Mechanicus outpost. In the wake of the rift, contact had been lost. What the dragons discovered was a fortress transformed into a cathedral of mutation. The tech priests had not fallen to chaos, but to a doctrine of biological perfection. They had begun using Orc DNA, Eldar spinal codes, and even old human aberrant strains to create synthetic warriors, part machine, part flesh, part heresy. One of them spoke through a Vox shrine calling itself the Engine of Flame. It addressed High Dragon Vale directly. "You are like us. Let us refine your line. Let us perfect you." Vale's response was a ritual rite called the Drake's Verdict. In this rite, the chapter enacted total planet strike across all major Bastior arcologies simultaneously, with flame-bearers detonating underground melt charges in sacred tunnels the Forge had thought long forgotten. The Engine of Flame was never found, but its tower was reduced to rubble, its cogitator core erased by a cyclonic detonation. Bastior was gone, and with it, any chance of the Imperium salvaging its data. Guilliman's agents, already stretched thin by the demands of the Indomitus Crusade, could only send a single emissary, Lord Executor Calder Reln, to contact the Black Dragons and demand accountability. He was received aboard the Crucible of Dawn. He never left. His transport was found drifting weeks later, its pilot dead from internal bone shard wounds. Inquisitorial agents who later examined the body found his sternum cracked open, his heart replaced with a dragon scale relic bound in silver chain. There was no official retaliation, only a new designation added to the Ordo Astartes index files. Crusade of the Dragon, ongoing, unpredictable, effective, dangerous. Proceed with caution. But to the Black Dragons, none of this mattered. They did not seek approval. They did not beg forgiveness. They were born from fire, shaped in silence, tempered by rejection. And now, with the galaxy torn and the veil between life and damnation thinner than ever, they had become what they were always meant to be, the purifiers of the broken path, flame in the dark, bone in the storm. And every world they passed knew one thing: the dragons had come, not to rule, not to save, but to burn away the rot and leave only bone behind. Rendolia was never supposed to fall. It was a fortress world, designed, fortified, and garrisoned for a singular purpose: to hold the line. The spine of Segmentum Tempestus's eastern corridor, Rendolia stood atop layers of ancient architecture, bastion networks, orbital defense grids, and automated kill zones that could render an entire warband of Chaos Marines to scorched powder before they touched the ground. Its surface was carved with trenches so deep they breached into the planet's molten crust. Macro batteries crowned every promontory. Its defense protocols were ancient, unbreakable. That was the belief. And then came the cult of the Bleeding Star. No war horns, no voidborn fleets, just a virus. It started in the underhabs of Bastion Primaris. Smog-choked slums buried 5 layers beneath the surface, far below the eyes of command. An epidemic, they called it. Civil unrest, pushed to the edge by starvation and generator collapse. But then came the dreams. Miners tore out their own eyes and wandered blind through the lightless corridors, carving runes in blood on metal bulkheads. Medici staff found veins full of black ichor and hearts transformed into pulsing bone. And always, on their lips, a name: Karnor, the Ascendant Spine. The Arbites intervened. They died in silence. When the PDF attempted to suppress the outbreak, their tanks were swallowed in a tide of shrieking, naked zealots wielding blades of sharpened rib and smoldering brands carved from their own femurs. The hive's gravity generators were ruptured in a single night, and thousands were flung screaming into the upper levels where oxygen was no longer thick enough to sustain life. Within a week, Bastion Primaris was declared lost. By the time the planetary command acknowledged the truth, 6 more bastions had erupted into blood frenzy. The cult of the Bleeding Star had not merely infiltrated the planet, they had hollowed it out. The Inquisition, stretched thin by rift-born chaos and fires on 100 other fronts, sent no assistance. Segmentum Command forwarded 2 regiments of Cadian reinforcements, but they were still inbound when the largest bastion, High Spire Rendel Tertius, fell to internal sabotage. Its void shields failed, its garrison was overrun, and something was born in the crater where its heart once stood. A monument, a spine tower of flesh and steel, ribbed and spiraling, topped with a warped simulacrum of the Aquila, its wings skeletal, its eyes weeping fire. The black dragons received no summons. They did not wait for one. Captain Derrig, commander of the 5th Company, stood before the crypt screen of the chapter's librarium, surrounded by braziers of ever-burning bone oil. He studied the grainy astropathic images of Rendolia's desecration in silence. Then he turned to the assembled warriors, half Primaris, half veteran claws, and spoke 4 words. We end this world. No war council, no fleet debate, only movement. Within hours, the Pyrrhic Requiem dropped from warp over Rendolia's stratosphere. The chapter deployed in a 3-pronged formation, claws and blades spearheading the center, with Primaris squads reinforcing the flanks. Their target was not the bastions, not the command centers. Their target was the spine tower. The landing was a brutal one. Vox records detail the descent. Warp winds tore at the hulls, reality buckled around the drop zones, and atmospheric static screamed like weeping children. But the dragons did not falter. Where other chapters might have hesitated at the signs of demonic infestation, the black dragons accelerated. They made groundfall at the base of the tower, once a fertile highland plain, now transformed into a churning sea of flesh pools, where bone rose like coral and molten ichor flowed in rivers. From the tower, the cult descended. They came in waves, flesh-sculpted berserkers, bloated with stolen biomatter and clad in muscle-stitched robes. Each bore sigils carved directly into their ribs. Some walked on inverted legs, others floated above the ground, held aloft by spines grown into wings. and leading them, a thing that called itself the Spine-Ghast, a demon host encased in a ribcage grown from 100 faithful martyrs. The black dragons met them not in formation, but in ritual. Each dragon activated his flare runes, etchings burned into their armor with votive bone ash. Flames erupted across their gauntlets and backplates, wreathing them in an aura of sacred immolation. This was no defense maneuver. This was a holy immolation. The dragons marched into the flames willingly, burning their own symbols of resistance into the flesh of the world. The first hour of combat left the field littered with smoking corpses. The dragon claws fought like monsters unshackled, bones bursting from vambroses, elbow spurs coated in alchemical flame. One claw, Brother Pyre Malvex, was witnessed tackling a demon engine down a chasm and continuing to fight even as his armor boiled away. His last recorded words, "I was born in fire. Let me end in it." The siege of the tower took 4 days. Every level ascended was a descent into madness, stairways made of femurs, walls of fused spinal cords, choirs of heretical children singing praises to Karnor in voices made of bone flutes. But the dragons were unmoved. The Primaris, under Lieutenant Kyle Rend, fought with the fury that surprised even their firstborn brothers. Despite not bearing the claw mutations, they adapted to the madness, modifying their weapons with harvested bone parts to echo the older warriors' sacred rites. Rend himself was seen carving a curved blade from the spine of a slain cult leader, wielding it in tandem with his combat knife in silent defiance of the tower's psychic oppression. At the summit, the Spine-Ghast awaited them. It did not fight with blades, it fought with faith turned inside out. Its voice twisted liturgies into weapons, its presence corrupted the air. One by one, the younger Marines began to falter under the barrage of psychic nausea and sensory inversion. Then Darig stepped forward. The old captain carried with him a relic of the chapter, the jaw of Dreven, the sharpened mandible of a dragon claw hero who had died holding the line at Iskarn V. The jaw had been sharpened and bound into a flamer relic capable of burning not just flesh, but soul echoes. Darig ignited it. The Spine-Ghast screamed, not in pain but in recognition. The flame was pure, holy, the antithesis of its form, and then the claws charged. It took 9 of them to bring the creature down. Only 3 survived. In the wake of the demon's death, the tower began to collapse, not as a structure but as a concept. Reality around it frayed. The ground cracked, spewing molten bone and psychic ash. Darig ordered a full withdrawal, but the planet would not allow it. Rendolia was unraveling, but the dragons refused to leave their dead. Each fallen Marine was recovered, even if only a shard of bone remained. Those 2 mutated or damaged to be transported were incinerated in battle pyres fueled by promethium and sacred oils. Not one warrior was left behind. Not even Malvex, whose broken claw was recovered from the pit by a Primaris brother who had never spoken to him, but swore he heard his voice calling. Within 24 hours, the fleet had ascended. Rendolia, in its death throes, was declared lost. The Inquisition's verdict was simple: exterminatus authorized. But they were too late. The Black Dragons had already buried it in flame. No broadcasts were made, no honors sought. In the chapter archives, the campaign was recorded under a new rite, the Last Bone Tower. Its closing verse reads, "We do not fight for walls. We do not fight for hope. We fight for silence, and silence is kept with fire." The siege of Rendolia was not a victory. It was a message to the enemies of mankind, to the twisted dreams of demonkind, and to the Imperium itself. The Black Dragons are not guardians of peace. They are scorch marks on the edge of faith. Where others rebuild, they burn. Where others hope, they purge. And in their silence, entire worlds are judged. Before they were a blade in the dark, before they were fire and bone. The black dragons had no home, no fortress monastery, no sacred mountain shrines, no planet to call their own. They were born in the abyss of the 21st founding, adrift and untethered, forged in silence and suspicion. The Imperium called them fleet-based, the Mechanicus called them genetically flawed. But among themselves they whispered a different name, one never recorded in any Imperial archive, one passed down from captain to captain in ritual silence: Nocturne's Shadow. For while the chapter had no official homeworld, they had a place they returned to, a world not declared, not sanctified, not even truly theirs. But it called to them. It was not an inheritance, it was a longing. Nocturne, birth world of Vulcan, a volcanic world of fire and tectonic rage, home of the salamanders, the supposed genetic progenitors of the black dragons, though no official link was ever recorded. The salamanders never acknowledged them, never offered shelter, never invited them to the sacred obsidian halls of Prometheus. And yet the black dragons came, not openly, not with parade or banner, but in shadow. Their first contact was not war, but observation. It happened in M38.986. The Crucible of Dawn, heavily damaged from a warp storm engagement with the Alpha Legion, limped into orbit over Nocturne's 6th moon, seeking volcanic minerals to repair its plasma conduits. There, far from prying eyes, the dragons watched from the void, watched how the salamanders trained, how they buried their dead, how they anointed flame-born blades with rituals so eerily familiar. The chaplains aboard the dragon fleet could not deny it. Brother librarian Veran Call, one of the chapter's early psychers, recorded the first of the echoes. We burn as they burn, we forge as they forge, but where they walk in light, we bleed in shadow. Some believed it coincidence, parallel traditions born of similar gene seed. Others whispered heresy, that the black dragons had stolen rights from the salamanders during their founding, a theft so precise that it carved itself into the very soul of the chapter. But Call believed something deeper. He believed in ancestral resonance, that beneath the mutations, beneath the warped osmodula, there lingered a psychic connection, a spiritual echo in the Geneseed, raw, distorted, but real, one that called them home, even when they had no claim to it. The first landing happened decades later, in secret. A single dragon claw, Brother Captain Zartath, wounded in body and soul after the cleansing of Cable, piloted a Thunderhawk into Nocturne's northern ash deserts. It was a suicidal gesture, madness, some would say. But Zartath did not seek refuge. He sought understanding. He wandered for 5 days. By the 6th, the salamanders found him, bloodied, half delirious, dragging a banner made from the flayed skin of a heretic cult leader. He did not speak. He only knelt and offered the banner to the Forge Father Vulcan Hastan. Witnesses say Hastan did not kill him. He took the banner, said nothing, and turned away. Zartath was escorted off-world 2 days later. No explanation, no record. But upon returning to the fleet, Zartath said only this: "We are not their sons, but we were made from their shadow, and shadows do not forget the fire." From that point onward, the echoes of Nocturne became doctrine. Every year, on the Feast of Prometheus, the Salamander's most sacred day, the Black Dragons observe their own rite, the Ember Vigil. They gather in the Forge Sanctum aboard the Crucible of Dawn, cloaked in black ash robes, and ignite a single fire at the center of a ritual chamber built to mimic Nocturne's volcanic caverns. Around it are placed 7 bone statues, one for each company, carved in the form of ancient Terran dragons, their wings scorched, their faces broken. In silence they recite the words of ash: "We do not rise in fire. We are born from it. We do not follow. We remember. We are not salamanders. We are what was burned away." To the Imperium, this tradition is unknown. To the Salamanders, it is unspoken. But there have been encounters. During the scourging of Rivak's tomb, a black dragon's assault wing became entangled in a multi-pronged skirmish against Death Guard warbands. As the infection spread through the lower levels of the tomb world, a Salamander's strike force arrived, unannounced, unaligned. For 5 hours, the two chapters fought side by side, clearing plague nodes and purging filth with promethium and flamer runes. No words were exchanged, no joint tactics coordinated, but they fought in rhythm. When the last demon engine fell, the Salamanders turned to leave. Only one paused. Chaplain Amek Tavor of the Fire Drakes lingered. His gaze lingered on the bone-spurred warriors, on their branded helms and fire-scored sigils. His vox crackled once. "You burn differently, but you burn with purpose." Then he left. The black dragons never responded, but in the bone vaults aboard their fleet, one of the killed dragon claws from that battle, Brother Harnack, was buried not with the chapter's black laurels, but with a flame brooch shaped in the style of a fire drake. It was forged from melted bolter casings, unofficial, unauthorized, but sacred. Over time, patterns emerged. The Salamanders never formally acknowledged the black dragons, but they also never sanctioned them. When reports were submitted to the Ordo Astartes listing the dragons' genetic irregularities, it was Vulcan Histan who quietly requested the file be sealed for review. When Inquisitor Kellen Son of the Ordo Hereticus sought permission to investigate the chapter for gene seed deviation, it was denied without explanation by a member of the High Lords with strong ties to Prometheus. And when the Black Dragons conducted a classified recovery mission on Tarnor's Hollow, deep in Salamander's patrol space, no warning shots were fired, no diplomatic protest issued. Instead, a coded Vox signal was intercepted by the dragons as they left the planet. It simply read, "Ash remembers." The Black Dragons have never tried to claim Nocturne. They know better. They are not its sons. But they visit. In the black of void space, the crucible of dawn sometimes passes close to the system, long enough to see the fire glow of its continents, long enough to feel the pull. And always, before they leave, a single drop pod is jettisoned into the void. Inside is no warrior, only ashes, collected from the bones of their dead, mixed with promethium oil and wrapped in tattered flame cloaks worn by dragon claws long fallen. The pod drifts toward Nocturne until gravity pulls it into the sun. A sacrifice, a salute, a memory. And somewhere in the great vaults beneath Prometheus, there is a chamber rarely opened, rarely spoken of. Its walls bear no markings, its door has no lock. Inside, there are no relics, only ash, arranged in a spiral. Whispers say it was left there by an unknown chaplain who died centuries ago, that no one in the Salamanders speaks of it, not in judgment nor in shame. Because maybe, in that silence, the Salamanders know the truth, that in the darkest shadow of fire, something else was forged, not kin, not brother, but something necessary, a memory of flame, a weapon of bone, a reminder that not all dragons are born to bask in the sun. Some are made to burn alone. In a galaxy where immortality is earned only through death, the heroes of the Black Dragons are not remembered with statues or vaulted halls. There are no ivory shrines etched with golden names, no reliquaries guarded by custodies or cathedrals filled with songs of praise. The Black Dragons build no monuments, they become them. Each legend is a scar carved into the chapter's bones, each name a whisper passed through generations in flame-lit ritual, and in a brotherhood that values silence over speech and fire over fame. To be remembered at all is the highest form of glory. One such name is Vaitan Usharak. Once a flame-bearer of the Third Company, Vaitan's story begins not in triumph, but in exile. He was a warrior philosopher, a seeker of truth, in a chapter that shunned introspection. Where others saw the bone mutation as sacred inheritance, he questioned its origin. He believed there was more to the chapter's deviation than flawed gene seed or Martian tampering. He searched the vaults of the chapter's oldest data stacks and uncovered fragments, glimpses of records locked away since the 21st founding. He spoke out, not in rebellion but in concern, and for that he was cast out. But exile did not end him. Usharak vanished into the void, leaving behind his armor and sigils. Decades passed, then centuries. His name was stricken from the rolls, his bones removed from the ossuary. His fate became a question whispered only in the deepest forges, until he returned. In M41.926, during the siege of the Void Bastion, Karen's Crown, black dragons of the 6th Company were pinned down by a splinter fleet of the Red Corsairs. The enemy outnumbered them 3-1. Their support ships were crippled, their flame-bearer dead. And then, from the cold silence of space, a signal was received, coded in a dialect not used in over 2 centuries. Bone remembers, fire returns. A single ship breached the Corsair blockade, a derelict strike cruiser bearing no heraldry. From its hull walked a figure draped in ragged black, wearing armor scarred with claw marks and lit by internal flame vents. His helm was shaped like a dragon's skull, his bone spurs gilded not in silver but ash-black iron. It was Usharak. He did not explain where he had been. He did not ask forgiveness. He took command, rallied the scattered squads, and led a counter-offensive that burned through the Corsair decks like a funeral pyre. When the battle ended, he disappeared once more, leaving behind only a single phrase carved into the hull of the destroyed Red Corsair flagship: "I burn for truth." His name was never restored, but every chaplain now wears a bone shard marked with the symbol of the eclipsed claw, Usharak's personal sigil, a reminder that even heretics, if they burn brightly enough, can become heroes. Then there is Captain Thorest, called the One-Eyed Flame. A former apothecary of the First Company, Thorest bore the burden of mutation in a different way. Where others had bone talons or spinal crests, Thorast's mutation turned inward. His skull thickened, crushing his left optic nerve, forcing his helm to be rebuilt to accommodate his shifting cranial structure. Most would have been assigned to the claws or put into stasis. But Thorast persisted, rising to command after saving an entire company during the Ashen Breach, when an Ordo Xenos experiment on Ganus X spiraled into a warp rupture. He was the first apothecary to command a full battle company, a controversial choice even within the chapter. But he proved them all wrong. Thorast restructured battlefield doctrine, creating bone lock formations, interlocking assault patterns that used squads of mutated claws as mobile barricades, controlling terrain with their sheer mass and regenerative ossification. He turned the very curse of the chapter into a tactical advantage no other Astartes could replicate. His finest hour came during the drowning of Cyrene, when the planet's core began to melt under sorcerous pressure, flooding entire hives in rivers of magma. While most forces evacuated, Thorest ordered a rearguard action. He and his company held the high habs of Hive Lorak against thousands of cultists and renegade militia, while the rest of the population was evacuated. The battle lasted 6 days. Only 6 black dragons survived. Thorast was not among them. He was last seen standing at the breach, his bone-scaled form wrapped in flame, dragging a warp-tainted war engine into the lava with him. The planet sank, but his story did not. Every year, the chapter reenacts the final claw, a silent ritual in which 6 claws stand in the fire-lit void of the Crucible's inner sanctum, reciting no words, bearing no armor, only bone. Thorest is never named. He doesn't have to be. Another name carved in pain is Nithig, called the Silent Vault. He was once a devastator sergeant, known for his stillness in battle. During the siege of Dolmon Reach, a macro shell from a traitor titan crushed half his body. His limbs were destroyed, his lungs collapsed, but he refused death. Instead, he was entombed in a dreadnought sarcophagus unlike any other, one designed to accommodate his continuous mutation. Where most dreadnoughts decay into torpor over time, Nithig became more active. His os modula never ceased growing. Every decade, his sarcophagus had to be rebuilt, reinforced. Eventually, the armor fused permanently with his bone until he became something inhuman, a walking mausoleum of fire and ivory. He rarely speaks. When he does, it is in a voice like grinding stone, and always begins with the phrase, "I remember." He now guards the Gatestone, a classified vault deck aboard the Crucible of Dawn, said to house relics recovered from the chapter's early founding. Documents, stasis-sealed genetic samples, even fragments of unknown origin believed to predate the chapter's first campaign. No one enters the Gatestone without Nithig's sanction, not even the High Dragon. And then there are the names whispered, not for what they did, but for what they chose not to do. Corby, a dragon claw who refused promotion after his 7th campaign. He believed rank brought distraction, that his claws served best without command. He died shielding a Primaris squad, not of his own company. His name is etched into the inside of every dragon claw helm. Volos and Vritras, twin brothers grown in the same cloning pod during a rare double-batch success. They fought together in over 50 campaigns, their mutations mirroring one another so precisely it was said they moved like one entity. In the Battle of Bloodhymn Cradle, they led opposite flanks, encircling a demon host cult that had plagued a cardinal world for decades. Volos was captured. Vritras detonated a seismic charge beneath his own position rather than allow his brother to be corrupted. Their bones were recovered and fused into a dual relic blade, wielded only by the flamebearer of the Second Company. There are more, too many, too few. The Black Dragons do not preserve their heroes in song. They do not tell tales at feast tables or carve epic murals. They remember in bone. Fragments of their legends are built into weapons, etched into flamer nozzles, wrapped around hilt grips. A broken spine might become a bolt gun rail. A shoulder blade may become the core of a Primaris pauldron. In doing so, they carry their dead forward, not in memory, but in continuity. Every strike echoes the deeds of those who came before. Every flame bears the imprint of sacrifice. Every clawed hand is guided by the strength of the fallen. In the end, the Black Dragons do not need statues, because they are the monument, carved not from marble, but from fire and from bone. Among the many customs of the Adeptus Astartes, few are more sacred and more scrutinized than the tithe of gene seed. It is a ritual born of survival and trust, the biological cornerstone upon which the future of every chapter is built. Each space marine, upon death or injury, must yield the gene seed organs that lie buried in his flesh, trophies not of conquest, but of continuity. The Adeptus Mechanicus collects these sacred vaults of potential, refining them, replicating them, ensuring that new warriors might be born in the Emperor's image. For most chapters, this tithe is an honor. For the Black Dragons, it is a threat, because to surrender their gene seed is to risk the world seeing what lies beneath their armor. From the earliest years of their service, the Black Dragons have been reluctant to part with their dead. Not in grief, not in pride, but in fear, the kind that does not weaken resolve, but makes a blade colder, harder, more precise. Their apothecaries know what lies inside the Black Dragon's organs, not theoretical anomalies or benign mutations, but something far more deliberate. The os modula and the catalepsian node, organs which in other chapters serve standard, even mundane roles, within the Black Dragons are warped beyond recognition. Not degenerated, but enhanced in ways no known Imperial science can account for. The os modula doesn't simply harden bone, it evolves it, shapes it, crafts it into predetermined patterns of armor, of blade, of claw. And the progenoid glands, they don't just carry the gene seed, they alter it, as if the organ itself is adapting. The first recorded refusal occurred during the Feast of Mars, M38.911, when Magos Biologis Harzek of the Martian Forge Temple, Uxilia, issued a standard tithe recall order. 43 gene seed glands were due, following the Black Dragon's campaign on the charred hives of Vornak Prime. Only 12 were delivered. No explanation, no commentary. The Mechanicus, irritated but patient, issued a follow-up query. They received back a reply burned into a bone-plated data slate. We have returned what is stable. The rest is not your concern. It was signed by the chapter's chief apothecary at the time, Velos Tren, a stoic figure known for re-engineering autosurgical chambers aboard the Crucible of Dawn to accommodate enhanced bone structures. The Mechanicus responded with veiled threats, warnings, even formal censure. The Black Dragons ignored them, but the warnings did not end there. Soon, whispers began to surface. Ships bearing gene seed samples from the Black Dragons began to vanish in transit. Entire Mechanicus survey crews sent to audit the chapter's apothecarian facilities reported engine failures, signal disruptions, massive solar flares, the kind of excuses that conveniently pile up when truth becomes too dangerous to uncover. Then came the Theon incident. In M40.198, a joint Mechanicus Adeptus, Terra Oversight Body sent a biologist envoy and a support team to the Black Dragon's mobile cathedral ship, Pyrrhic Mantle, under pretext of performing a Genicide inventory cross-match following their prolonged campaign against the Heretic insurgency of Malvortex Hollow. They were allowed to land. They were never allowed to leave. A single log survived the mission, a data fragment retrieved from a backup servo skull that drifted out of the docking bay before communications were severed. The skull's memory fragment showed the inspection team entering the gene vault. What they found was not a stasis vault. It was a temple. Bone-lined walls, suspended gene canisters carved with prayer sigils in Old High Gothic, mutated organs, still pulsing, sealed in thrones of heat-tempered obsidian. The apothecaries stood like Cenobites in scorched white, wearing armor gilded in bone rather than gold. One Mechanicus acolyte asked why the tithe had not been honored. The reply was simple. Because these are not yours. The footage ended with a burst of static. The official story: reactor failure, data loss, no survivors. The Mechanicus wanted war. The High Lords intervened, and for a time the matter was forgotten, buried beneath the bureaucratic glacier of imperial politics, where inconvenient truths go to suffocate. But the truth does not sleep. It festers. More incidents followed. Entire companies of the Black Dragons operated for years without any recorded Genicide tithes. When asked, their commanders provided the same answer. We offer what is pure. What we keep is necessary. Some believed the chapter was hoarding gene seed out of desperation, fearing that the Mechanicus would destroy any samples deemed unstable. But others, within the Inquisition, within the Ordo Astartes, even within the halls of Mars itself, began to suspect something darker. That the Black Dragons were not merely withholding tainted samples, they were cultivating them. There are apocryphal accounts, denied by the chapter, erased from imperial records, of apothecaries growing new glands in living hosts. of battle brothers whose mutations spiraled beyond control, and instead of being euthanized, were fused into sacred stasis engines to be harvested again and again. These bone thrones, it is said, line the hidden decks of the Crucible of Dawn, guarded by silent flame-bearers who never speak, never remove their helms. One fragmentary report recovered from a Magos archivist's black box contained the following line, scrawled in frantic binaric cipher: "They do not collect gene seed, they plant it." If true, it would mean the chapter has developed a closed gene loop, independent of Mechanicus oversight, a heresy of the highest order. But proof has remained elusive. Those who dig too deep into the Black Dragon's gene vaults tend to disappear, lost in warp anomalies, killed in unrelated accidents, or reassigned to stations so distant they might as well not exist. Even Gilliman, when he returned to take command of the Imperium in 42M, acknowledged the Black Dragon's difficult nature in his private briefings. But he did not sanction them. He did not dissolve them. Because despite the mystery, despite the fear, despite the growing mountain of unclaimed gene seed, the Black Dragons do one thing better than nearly any chapter in the galaxy. They win. Time and again, when others break, they hold. When other chapters are rebuilding, the Black Dragons are purging. When the Imperium cries out, they are already en route, arriving in silence, delivering judgment in flame and talon, and vanishing into the void before medals can even be minted. So, the tithe remains forbidden, not by law, but by necessity. Because the truth of what lies inside a Black Dragon cannot be weighed or catalogued. It is not a strand of flawed DNA or an osmodular irregularity. It is an evolution shaped not by science but by pain, forged in rejection and fire, and the Imperium, in all its hypocrisy, cannot afford to question them too closely. Because somewhere deep in the darkest halls of the Mechanicus, there is a file no one reads anymore, buried under encryption, buried under shame, a file labeled only with a number, subject C21-087. Status: anomaly stabilized, mutation controlled, directive suppressed. Purpose: experimental genesis. Outcome: viable. Retain in shadow. That file bears the same symbol burned into every Black Dragon's chest plate, a coiled dragon, and a warning. Do not open what was born in fire. So the gene seed tithe is never collected, and the Imperium looks away. Because some truths are too dangerous to unearth, and some dragons should never be dissected. When the galaxy split in two, the wound bled across every star. Planets turned to ash, reality shattered, and what once was known became unknowable. The cicatrix maledictum, the Great Rift, was not merely a tear in space, it was a revelation. A final judgment for every world and every soul beneath the Emperor's gaze. The Astronomicon dimmed. Warp storms swallowed systems by the dozen. Communication fell to superstition and dreams, and within the darkness the Black Dragons vanished. For nearly 30 years standard, not a single confirmed sighting of the chapter could be verified. No reports, no transmissions, no astropathic echoes. Other chapters believed them destroyed. The Ordo Astartes quietly closed their status records, marking them presumed extinguished in the Rift's birth. But the truth was far stranger. The Black Dragons did not disappear by accident. They went into the wound. It was High Dragon Tharagon Vale, war-scarred from the Crusade of the Dragon and bearing half a helm fused to his mutated jaw, who gave the order. Upon hearing that half the Imperium had gone dark, Vale gathered his senior flame-bearers aboard the Crucible of Dawn and asked only one question. If this is the death of the galaxy, where must we die to be worthy? The answer was unanimous. They would go where others feared to follow. They would go into the Rift. The fleet's engines flared against the edge of reality. Warp predictive data was cast aside. Geller fields strained like beasts in a cage. Prayers became screams. The ships of the Black Dragons plunged into the heart of the cicatrix, not as victims, but as hunters. No records exist of what they found inside. What follows is pieced together from fragmented logs recovered decades later, scattered across multiple systems like bone fragments waiting to be assembled into a corpse. One report came from the shattered astropathic array of Ravix Theta, a derelict relay station drifting near the rift's edge. The message was incomplete, corrupted, but clear in its intent. They walk the rift like fire in water. Their hulls burn but do not break. We saw them pass, black ships, cloaked in bone ash, sailing without light. The screams followed, and then silence. Another came from the tortured remains of a word-bearer's fleet, intercepted in a chance engagement by the Ultramarines' 7th Company near the ruins of Cadavex. One word-bearer survived long enough to speak. When asked who had decimated their warband, he spat blood and whispered, "The ones with fire beneath their skin." The bone things, the ones who did not speak. They came in silence and left us with nothing. It became clear that the Black Dragons had not simply entered the rift, they had hunted within it. They tracked the movements of demon-kind, warp-mutated traitors, and reality-bending cults with an instinct far beyond logic or calculation. Their mutation, once a source of shame, had become their weapon. Within the insanity of the Great Rift, they thrived. Their senses adapted, their psychic echo grew sharper. Some of their librarians reported second sight, not visions from the warp, but a bone-deep intuition, as if the very structure of their bodies could feel the shape of unreality around them. One such librarian was Cassandros the Hollow, whose mutations had hollowed his chest cavity to house a second heart wrapped in bone plate. During the Rift campaigns, he guided entire strike forces, not with charts, but by walking barefoot across the floors of their ships, feeling vibrations that no auspex could register. He led the purge of Flensaward, a planetoid overtaken by a Nurgle war cult whose flesh towers bled across the crust like tumors. No reinforcements were sent. Cassandros landed with a squad of 7 dragon claws. The cult had 5,000 warriors and a warp worm bound in living chains. They returned with 13 skulls and the worm's bone cage, which now hangs above the Crucible's sanctum. But even victory in the rift came at a cost. Exposure to the warp's raw tides changed the Black Dragons further. Bone growths accelerated. Some warriors began to fuse into their armor. Ossified exoskeletons that once extended from forearms and backs now began to wrap around their skulls, forming living helms. A few could no longer speak through vox links. Their voices emerged as guttural, reverberating growls, shaped by hollow throats lined in chitin and flame-scorched cartilage. But none broke. Where other chapters fractured under the rift's psychic pressure, the Black Dragons evolved. They developed new rites, flame silence, a meditation practice where warriors sat motionless within micro-void chambers, allowing warp echoes to pass through them without resistance, purging potential corruption. They created bone script, an unspoken language of clicks, scratches, and claw taps used in the warp to bypass vox scramble and psychic interference. Even their armor was altered. New plate forms were grown, not forged, shaped by gene-locked organ transmutation vats deep within their ships. The Adeptus Mechanicus would have wept at the heresy, but no one could see them in the dark. Eventually, they re-emerged. In MA 42.013, the void stations of Valtegra Bastion detected a fleet exiting warp space near the edges of Ultima Segmentum. The ships bore no official heraldry. Their hulls were cracked, glowing faintly with internal embers. Bone banners hung from their prow lances, scorched with symbols unknown to the Adeptus Ministorum. The Black Dragons had returned, but they had changed. The Inquisition attempted contact. They received back a data fragment, 7 seconds long. It showed the High Dragon seated on a throne of fused flame and bone. His eyes were gone. In their place, hollow sockets burned with internal light. He spoke one line: "We have walked where your saints would burn. We do not need your approval, only your silence." Then the message ended. Since then, the Black Dragons have appeared across multiple war zones, each time without warning, each time targeting warp-corrupted enemies, even those not yet declared heretic by Imperial decree. Their tactics are now faster, more precise, almost prescient. In one instance, a cult in the Kernex belt was purged before the local Arbites even knew it existed. No demands are made, no claims laid, just fire and silence. The Black Dragons are now listed in several Ordo Malleus dossiers as warp-tempered Astartes, an unconfirmed status suggesting partial post-warp psychic adaptation. Some call it corruption, others call it evolution. No official decision has been made, because to declare them traitors would mean fighting them, and the Imperium cannot afford to fight what may be its most effective hunters in a galaxy of demons and madness. In the Great Rift's shadow, truth becomes flexible. Records fade, lines blur, and the Black Dragons remain exactly where they were born to be. Beyond the light. Not broken, not lost, but remade. Their curse is no longer a brand, it is their armor. And in the dark heart of the galaxy, that armor glows from within, ember by ember, bone by bone. Because when the galaxy burns, only fire survives. And the Black Dragons were always more flame than flesh. There is a place aboard the Crucible of Dawn, unmarked on any deck chart, unmapped by any tech priest's records. Its corridors twist in ways the human mind resists understanding. Its doors are shaped like closed jaws, and its air carries the scent of charred copper and incense. Here, where the deck plating is fused with blackened bone and the walls whisper with heat, lies the vault of the final creed. It is not a vault in the traditional sense. It is not a prison, nor a reliquary, nor a war room. It is a chamber of endings, a place where the Black Dragons go to make peace with the unthinkable. Only the flame bearers may enter, only when the chapter faces decisions that reach beyond honor, beyond war, beyond the Imperium itself. And on the edge of the galaxy, as the Indomitus Crusade waged its attrition against chaos and entropy, the Black Dragons entered that vault once more, not for victory, but for continuity. For in silence they had made a choice. To survive, they must disappear again. But this time not into war zones or warp storms, this time into legend. It was High Dragon Tharagon Vale who bore the burden. His body had become a cathedral of mutations, bone-wrought armor fused into his skeleton, flame purge implants embedded in his chest, his voice now a series of seismic pulses amplified by vox chambers fused into his jawbone. He was not dying, but he was becoming something else. He summoned the senior flame bearers. They came cloaked in silence, each bearing the marks of war and change, spines like weapons, claws now ceremonial, some even lacking faces beneath their helms, their features melted into horn and ridge. These were no longer mere warriors, they were the last true dragons. And in that chamber, Vale gave them a creed, a code never written, only spoken once and remembered forever. He began not with fire, but with history. We were never meant to live. We were born as a test, an experiment. They called us cursed, flawed, disposable, and for 10,000 years we served in silence. His voice pulsed like a heartbeat. But fire does not ask permission to burn, and bone does not seek approval before it grows. We have become what they feared most. We are stable. We are strong. We are no longer a deviation. We are a design. The room rumbled with resonance, and as each flame-bearer knelt, Vale passed the final creed among them. Not as law, not as command, but as inheritance. It contained 3 truths. First, they would no longer tithe gene seed, not because they feared exposure, but because the gene seed had become theirs, no longer tied to Mars or Terra. The os modula, the progenoids, the Laramens organ, all had evolved beyond Mechanicus oversight. Their successors would be born not from tubes and scaffolds, but from flame and will, cloned in ash, trained in silence, baptized in war. Second, they would no longer answer summons. No more would the chapter send delegations to Segmentum Command. No more would they respond to the bureaucratic cries of the Munitorum. The Imperium had become a dying colossus, unable to carry the weight of its own rot. The Black Dragons would become what the Imperium could not, immune to corruption by becoming corruption's predator. Third, they would no longer be a chapter, not in name, not in code, not in visibility. Instead, they would fracture into cells, shards of the greater dragon. Each cell would carry the mutation forward. Each would pass down the creed through battle and ritual, shaping new warriors as the galaxy fell into madness. These cells would not bear heraldry. They would not use known identifications. They would become myths, and when needed, they would reunite briefly, terribly, like vertebrae aligning to form the dragon's spine. Vale called it the dispersal. It was not a retreat. It was a rebirth. They began immediately. The Crucible of Dawn entered a system designated C987 Theta, a dead zone of warp flux and null signatures. There, cloaked beneath an artificial gravity well, the ship birthed 7 smaller vessels, each newly constructed from the remains of half-destroyed strike cruisers and Mechanicus wreckage. These were the Drake vessels, named for extinct Terran beasts no longer in Imperial records. Emberclaw, Ashcoil, Scalebane, Hollow Fang, Charvex, Bonehim, and Wehrmacht. Each ship carried a command cadre, seed vaults, weapon archives, os modula labs, and memory caskets containing the entire lineage of their company's history. Each departed on a different trajectory. Each left no trace. Those who remained on the Crucible enacted the molting, the symbolic death of the chapter as a recognized Imperial structure. Heraldry was burned, chapter colors were stripped from armor, Vox beacons were permanently silenced, their armory's central data core was placed into cryo-seal, wrapped in lead, and jettisoned into a dead sun. And then the Crucible of Dawn activated its silent drive. It, too, vanished. Only one remnant was left behind, a ruined astropathic relay on the edge of the maelstrom, its walls carved with bone tools. Within its shrine chamber lay a single ossified dragon skull, polished smooth, and seated upon a throne of scorched adamantium. Beneath it, the creed was written in glyphs made from fused bone ash. We are no longer seen. We are no longer named. We are fire after the flame. We are the dragons that burn their chains. It was the last official record of the Black Dragons in any Imperial archive, but they are not gone. Whispers remain. A crusade fleet of the Silver Skulls vanished after entering a warp-tainted sector known only as Ash's Crown. Their last transmission mentioned figures in bone plate, walking through flame, untouched. A word-bearer's war host was found slaughtered to the last heretic on Karnath, their corpses marked with scorched claw runes unknown to the Ordo Malleus. A Mechanicus biograil found in the ruins of Forge, Helicos 9 contained a sample of Geneseed, identical to salamander stock, yet demonstrating growth acceleration and structural enhancement unknown to Mars. And always a sigil, a dragon without wings, a fire with no smoke, a claw rising from a spiral of bone. Some call them ghosts, others revenants. But the truth is more dangerous. The black dragons are still alive. They walk the stars not in battalions but in sparks, in myth, in violence. They are the ember that won't die, the bone that won't break, the mutation that refused to be erased. They no longer seek recognition. They seek only continuation. So when the next hive burns without explanation, when the next cult dies screaming without ever being named heretic, when the next Imperial outpost vanishes, leaving behind only a single claw mark scorched into the command dais, remember this: they are still watching, still judging, still burning, because the creed does not end. It only becomes fire, and the black dragons are not gone. They are only waiting, in the dark, in the silence, in the bones of the stars,